Coming up tonight, Prime Minister announces formulation of Fiji's new constitution. Members of new Constitutional Commission named. And Australia expected to change stance on Fiji. Good evening, I'm Sandra Assam. Prime Minister Bainimarama this morning announced Fiji's plan to formulate a new constitution. Making the announcement at government buildings, the Prime Minister also laid out the timetable for the constitutional consultation.
The next 12 months is going to be crucial in determining the future of the country. Today, Prime Minister Bainimarama underlined that the next 12 months will include a civic education program for all Fijians in the urban, rural and maritime areas to actively contribute their ideas of a new constitution.
The elimination of ethnic voting, proportional representation and a voting age of 18. In the month of May, we will commence a civic education program to last until July. As stated in the book, Constitution Making and Reform, published by Interpeace and authored by international experts, to have effective consultations, the public must be well informed of the issues that they need to think about, that they need to address, that they need to express. If the public is not educated about the issues to consider, then the process will be useless.
PM Bainimarama emphasized the importance of consultations with the public, highlighting that during the 1997 constitutional consultations, Fijians were never given enough information and materials to fully understand the issues they needed to be considered for the constitutional process.
We want true consultations. We want to hear from ordinary Fijians, not just the elite or the well-connected. In order to facilitate the civic education program, from now until April, the government will collate and print material highlighting issues for all Fijians to think about before they make their voices heard in the consultation process. To ensure Fijians understand and contribute meaningfully, all informational material will be distributed in urban, rural, and maritime areas, to farmers, to fishermen, to youth, and to women's organizations. In short, to everyone.
Issues the public need to consider are: should economic and social rights be included in the Bill of Rights, size of Parliament, the quality of candidates in Parliament, and should Fiji have a Senate? If so, should they be elected or selected? And should political parties and office holders disclose their assets and liabilities?
For the first time, everyone will have a voice. This is a fundamental part of the constitutional formulation process that cannot be and must not be compromised. The Constitution must be premised on the fundamental values and principles set out in the People's Charter for Change, which my government has been advocating and implementing. These principles and values are universally recognized and inspired to. Therefore, these principles and values are non-negotiable. They are a common and equal citizenry, a secular state, the removal of systemic corruption, an independent judiciary, elimination of discrimination, good and transparent governance, social justice, one person, one vote, one value, the elimination of ethnic voting, proportional representation, and a voting age of 18.
A new 5-member Constitutional Commission will oversee the consultation process, and a Constituent Assembly will be formed by the end of this year to discuss, debate and approve Fiji's new constitution. This was confirmed by Head of Government, Prime Minister Bainimarama.
The chairperson of the Constitutional Commission will be internationally renowned constitutional and human rights expert Professor Yash Gai. Two of the three distinguished Fijian members who will also make up the Constitutional Commission are Taufa Vakatale, Fiji's first female Deputy Prime Minister, and Professor Satendra Nandan, academic, writer and former Member of Parliament, with 2 additional names to be announced in due course. The timeline of the process begins from May to July 2012, with civic education programs for the public to be well informed of issues they need to consider in moving the nation forward. From July to September this year, consultations between the Constitutional Commission and citizens begins. From October to December 2012, the Constitutional Commission will collate the public submissions, and from January to March 2013, a draft constitution will be submitted to the Constituent Assembly, with a draft constitution submitted to the office of the President.
From October to the end of December, 2012, the Constitutional Commission will collate the public submissions, and based on the guiding principles, the Commission will draft a constitution. The draft constitution will then, in January 2013, be submitted to the Constituent Assembly.
PM Bainimarama says the rules for the Constituent Assembly, such as quorums, speaking rights and voting, shall be finalized with the assistance of international experts prior to the formation of the Constituent Assembly, adding that the composition of the Assembly will be announced by December of this year.
My fellow Fijians, the next 12 months is going to be crucial in determining the future of our beloved country. We must all be forthcoming, actively contribute to and participate in this process with a view to ensure a better Fiji for all Fijians. We must put aside any prejudices, any self-interest, and political ambitions. In doing so, we will ensure peace, prosperity, economic well-being, and a sustained and true democracy for all.
He added once the Constituent Assembly approves the Constitution by the end of February next year, it will be assented to His Excellency the President.
Australia's new Foreign Affairs Minister Bob Carr is expected to travel to New Zealand to meet the New Zealand Prime Minister John Key to discuss Fiji's banning from the Pacific Islands Forum since 2009. This is after the new Foreign Affairs Minister Bob Carr revealed he will be traveling to New Zealand just 7 days after being sworn into office to meet with various other foreign ministers and leaders, and Fiji will be a topic of discussion.
Last Friday, Bob Carr was appointed as the new Foreign Affairs Minister by the Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard. Bob Carr replaced Kevin Rudd, under whose leadership Fiji was isolated by Australia. The new Foreign Affairs Minister, Bob Carr, is planning to travel to New Zealand to meet with the New Zealand Prime Minister John Key to discuss Fiji's banning from the Pacific Islands Forum in 2009, as well as incentives for Fiji, such as lifting some of the sticks against the government, including the foreign ban and some reversal of Australian sanctions that was set up in the wake of government's cleanup campaign. The sanctions also bar entry or transit through Australia for the Fijian citizens being declared by the New Zealand Foreign Minister, especially those who had links to the current government or the RFMF. Meanwhile, Alexander Downer, Australia's longest-serving foreign minister, says the nation's diplomatic future abroad looked much brighter under Carr's leadership than it had under Kevin Rudd's. Downer says Carr's upcoming trip to New Zealand, his first as foreign minister designate, was a good sign that relationships in the region would be repaired. According to the Australian, Downer says signs are a lot more positive when compared to the past 18 months, adding that Bob Carr needs to invest the bulk of his time in the Pacific and deal with the Fiji issue a bit more effectively. Australian opposition Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Julie Bishop says, rather than ignoring Fiji, Australia should lead the way with engagement. According to Bishop, Australia should lead in working with local authorities to find solutions to the problems facing Fiji and open discussions on electoral reforms in order to ensure that an election takes place as soon as possible. Earlier this year, the Lowy Institute of International Policy's Jenny Hayward-Jones, in a paper titled Policy Brief on Fiji, said Canberra's tough love policy has failed in its central aim, to persuade the government of Frank Bainimarama to restore democracy. Hayward-Jones further adds that the Fijian government has instead developed new alliances and partnerships which undermine Australia's influence and leadership. She adds that Australia's allies have begun to question whether isolating Fiji is the best way to restore democracy in the country. She also said Australia should build and lead a new coalition with traditional and non-traditional partners such as Indonesia, South Korea and Papua New Guinea to work with Fiji on a package of assistance for electoral and constitutional reform, consistent with Fiji's 2014 election timetable. The paper also says that more contact between Australia and Fiji diplomats and through the winding back of travel sanctions would restore much-needed trust and goodwill to clear a way for a more effective approach. Yesterday, Fijian Foreign Affairs Minister Ratu Inoke Kumbuambola says Fiji remains committed to its path of creating a new constitution and holding democratic elections. In a statement issued by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Ratu Inoke says Fiji has always remained open to dialogue with Australia, but given the history of Australia's policy towards Fiji, this remains a wait-and-see position.
Coming up after the break, Health Ministry sends officers to monitor toothpaste sale, and Commonwealth team briefed on Fiji's current socio-political reform agenda.